Tonight, we will tell you a story of a civilization unlike any other in the ancient world, a story forged in a crucible of iron discipline and unyielding will, the story of Sparta. You will discover how an entire society was built on the foundation of unwavering obedience, a people who lived by laws that shaped their every breath from the moment they were born until their last. We will explore the brutal training that transformed boys into the most formidable warriors of the ancient world, how children were taken from their families to be molded by the state, the unique strength of their women, and how their relentless pursuit of military perfection led them to unparalleled power and ultimately to their own unique decline. This is not merely a chronicle of battles, it is a journey into the heart of a way of life so extreme, so demanding that it would likely break most of us today. Yet it forged legends. Oh, and if you enjoy these stories that not only soothe your mind but also expand your understanding of history, please consider subscribing to the channel and pressing the bell icon so you never miss a new journey into the past. All right, find a comfortable spot, let the day's worries drift away. Take a deep, calming breath and feel your body sink into the comfort of your bed. Allow your mind to relax as we prepare to journey back in time. Our story begins in a rugged valley in the southern Peloponnese, a land of mountains and fertile plains, where a small Greek city-state would rise to become a legend, not through wealth or art, but through an almost fanatical devotion to military excellence. Today, we journey to another era, to a world where iron was forged not only into weapons, but into the souls of men. A world that was itself an experiment, a challenge to everything understood as civilization. We will talk about Sparta, not a city that shimmered with marble or traded in riches, no. Sparta was more of an idea, embodied in stone and steel, a living testament that discipline could become the highest form of art and survival. While other Greek city-states, such as Athens and Attica, or the vital trading hub of Corinth, flourished through maritime trade, philosophy, and art, developing their unique forms of government, including democracy, Sparta took a completely different path. It was located in the fertile valley of Laconia on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, far from the sea, which already distinguished it from many Greek maritime powers. But it was not its geographical location that made it so unique, but its society, forged from harsh necessity and constant fear. Imagine a world where every step, every word, every action is subject to a single goal, maintaining the power and security of the state, where personal freedom gave way to collective strength, where children belonged not to their parents but to the entire community, and where weakness was considered the worst of all vices, while strength of spirit and body was the highest virtue. Such was Sparta, which somehow managed to withstand the test of time. Its history, like any great history, begins long before it acquired its final legendary form. In the beginning, it was one of many Dorian settlements, an ordinary Greek city whose life differed little from others. But everything changed after a series of bloody conflicts known as the Messenian Wars. Messenia, located to the west of Laconia, was a vast and extremely fertile region that Sparta sought to conquer to ensure its food security. After long and incredibly brutal wars, which according to some sources lasted almost a century, Messenia was finally subjugated, and its inhabitants, the Messenians, were turned into helots, state-owned slaves who were tied to the land, cultivating it and providing Sparta with all necessary sustenance. This seemingly grand victory, which brought Sparta enormous wealth in the form of land and labor, simultaneously created a constant and deadly internal threat. The Helots, who significantly outnumbered the Spartiates themselves, the full-fledged citizens of Sparta who were descendants of the Dorian conquerors, never accepted their position. They constantly remembered their former greatness and longed for freedom, ready to revolt at the first, most insignificant opportunity. The Helot uprisings were not just slave revolts. They were full-scale internal wars that threatened the very existence of the Spartan state. And it was this unceasing fear, this constant sword of Damocles hanging over the head of every Spartiate, that forced them to rebuild their entire society, subjecting it to the sole purpose of survival. They realized that to keep such a numerous Helot population in submission, they needed the strongest and most disciplined army in the entire Greek world. They needed a constant readiness for war, not just as a means of conquering new lands, but as an existential method of their own survival. Thus, Sparta began its journey toward the unique martial discipline that was destined to become its trademark. It did not build luxurious temples that could rival the Parthenon in Athens, nor did it create grand sculptures or write profound philosophical treatises like Plato or Aristotle. Its only masterpiece, its main work of art, was its own army, its invincible citizen warriors. Every life, every state resource, every social rule was subordinated to this supreme militaristic goal. Sparta became a state where citizens were soldiers and soldiers were citizens. And these two identities were inextricably linked. They lived in simple, functional barracks, ate at common tables, training from morning till night, and their entire way of life was subject to the strictest military discipline. Personal enrichment was despised, luxury was considered a disgrace, and any form of weakness, be it physical or moral, was seen as a crime against the state. This was a world where even money was made of heavy, inconvenient iron, so that no citizen would strive to accumulate wealth that would distract from their military duty. They did not want their citizens to be distracted from the main goal, to be the best, invincible warriors. It was this fear of a potential Helot uprising and the deep realization that their survival depended solely on their collective, unprecedented strength that led to the creation of the harshest, most effective, and most enduring military society in the history of the ancient world. While other Greeks prided themselves on their individual achievements, their geniuses and inventions, the Spartiates prided themselves on their ability to merge into a single, invincible organism. Their strength lay not so much in brilliant commanders as in each individual warrior who was ready to die for his shield, for his neighbor in the phalanx, for Sparta. It was a world where the word obedience was not just a rule or a law, but the very air they breathed. And this system, seemingly cruel and inhumane, for many centuries provided Sparta with unprecedented stability, internal security, and undeniable military superiority over all other Greek city-states. It was forged from necessity, tempered in the fire of many wars, and polished by constant fear. And it lasted longer than any other form of government in ancient Greece, leaving behind a unique imprint on the history of humanity. The transformation of Sparta into this unique militaristic state is inextricably linked with the figure of Lycurgus, a legendary lawgiver whose very existence is shrouded in the mists of time, but whose influence on Spartan society was undeniably profound. Although some ancient historians debated whether he was a real person or a mythological embodiment of Spartan ideals, the Spartans themselves believed he was the architect of their rigid system. It is said that he lived around the 9th or 8th century BC, during a period when Sparta was still forging its identity, struggling with internal strife, and the constant threat posed by their enslaved population, the Helots. It was a time of deep instability, and the desperate need for order, for a clear and unwavering path forward, was paramount. According to tradition, Lycurgus traveled extensively, studying the laws and customs of other lands, including Crete and possibly even Egypt, seeking the ideal model for a stable and powerful state. He observed various forms of government and social structures, carefully extracting what he believed were the most effective principles for creating a harmonious and formidable community. Upon his return to Sparta, he initiated a complete overhaul of their society, a radical transformation that touched every aspect of life, from birth to death. His reforms introduced an all-encompassing way of life, an entire philosophy imposed upon the population, shaping every facet of their existence. The core of Lycurgus's reforms was embodied in what became known as the Great Retra, a series of unwritten foundational laws that were believed to have been given to him by the Delphic oracle itself, endowing them with profound divine authority. This divine endorsement was crucial, as it lent his radical proposals an unprecedented legitimacy. Making them nearly unchallengeable, the Retra dictated that Sparta would have a dual kingship, with two kings from two different royal houses, the Agiads and the Eurypontids, serving as military leaders and religious figures, balancing each other's power. This unique system was carefully designed to prevent any single individual from accumulating excessive power, a frequent source of discord in other Greek city-states. In addition to the kings, the Retra established a council of elders, the Gerousia, composed of 28 men over the age of 60, elected for life, plus the two kings. This council prepared legislation and served as the highest court, providing wisdom and stability to the state. Then there were the Ephors, 5 magistrates elected annually by the assembly of citizens. While seemingly subordinate to the kings and the Gerousia, the Ephors wielded immense power, overseeing the kings, controlling the Agoge, the Spartan training system, and even having the authority to declare war. Their paramount role was to ensure that the laws of Lycurgus were strictly followed, acting as the vigilant guardians of the Spartan way of life. The Retra also fundamentally reshaped the Spartan economy and social structure. Lycurgus abolished individual land ownership, instead redistributing the land into equal plots, or kleroi, allocated to each citizen. These kleroi were worked by the Helots, and their produce was intended to sustain the Spartan warrior class, freeing them from agricultural labor and allowing them to dedicate their entire lives to military training and service. This radical economic equality among citizens was aimed at eliminating the wealth disparities that often led to corruption and internal strife, fostering a deep sense of shared purpose and collective identity. Furthermore, the Great Retra mandated a system of common messes known as the syssitia, where all male citizens, regardless of their social standing or wealth, ate together in communal dining halls. Each man was required to contribute a certain amount of food and drink from his kleros. This daily ritual provided sustenance and, more importantly, served as the cornerstone of Spartan social cohesion, reinforcing brotherhood, loyalty, and equality among the warriors. It was in these dining halls, often stark and unadorned, that young men learned from their elders, shared military experiences, and forged the unbreakable bonds that would serve them on the battlefield. The food was simple, often described as coarse, emphasizing practicality over luxury. You would find plain, nutritious fare designed to build strong bodies and foster endurance. Lycurgus also introduced an iron currency, heavy and cumbersome, making it impractical for large-scale transactions and hoarding. This was a deliberate attempt to discourage luxury, trade, and the accumulation of personal wealth, further cementing the Spartan disdain for materialism. The idea was to keep Sparta insulated from the corrupting influences of foreign trade and to prevent the citizens from becoming soft or distracted by worldly possessions. The focus was always on the state, on collective strength, and on military excellence, on a singular devotion. His reforms extended even to the appearance and daily life of the Spartans. Men were encouraged to wear simple cloaks, avoid elaborate hairstyles or adornments, and maintain a severe, almost ascetic appearance. Luxury and excessive display were frowned upon, seen as contrary to the Spartan ideal of disciplined strength and civic virtue. The system Lycurgus created was designed to produce a homogeneous class of warriors, bound by a common code of conduct and an unwavering loyalty to the state. Every aspect of their lives was directed toward this single goal, maintaining military superiority and internal stability against the ever-present threat of the Helots. It was the unyielding foundation upon which the Spartan warrior was built, a structure so rigid, so all-encompassing, that it defined them for centuries, making them both revered and feared throughout the ancient world, a testament to their unique and uncompromising vision. Once the foundational laws of Lycurgus, the Great Retra, were established, every aspect of Spartan life was meticulously reshaped to serve the state. And this began not with training, but with birth itself. A Spartan child's journey was unlike any other in the ancient world, devoid of the typical parental indulgence found elsewhere. From the very first breath, a newborn's fate was not decided by its parents, but by the community. Immediately after birth, the infant was brought before a council of elders, often the Gerousia, the Spartan council of 28 elders, or sometimes the ephors, a powerful board of 5 overseers. These venerable men would gather at the lesh, a public common area, to perform a critical examination. They were not looking for beauty or charm. Their sole concern was the child's physical perfection. They meticulously inspected the infant for any signs of weakness, deformity, or illness. This was not an act of cruelty in their eyes, but a pragmatic decision for the strength of the polis, the city-state. A child deemed physically imperfect, one who might grow into a burden on the state or an ineffective warrior, was not allowed to live. Such infants were taken to a chasm at the foot of Mount Taygetus, a formidable mountain range that dominated the Spartan landscape, and left to perish. This grim practice, though shocking to modern sensibilities, was considered a necessary measure to ensure that only the strongest and most robust individuals would survive and contribute to the collective might of Sparta. It was a stark manifestation of the principle that individual life was secondary to the well-being and military supremacy of the state. If the infant passed this rigorous inspection, it was then returned to its mother. But even this period of early childhood was governed by strict Spartan principles. Unlike children in other Greek city-states, Spartan babies were not swaddled, nor were they allowed to cry excessively or display fear. They were encouraged from infancy to be independent and unafraid of darkness or solitude. Spartan mothers, renowned for their resilience and stern demeanor, raised their children with minimal emotional attachment, preparing them for the inevitable separation that lay ahead. Often, nurses from the Helot population, the subjugated people of Laconia, were employed, chosen specifically for their ability to raise strong, disciplined children, free from coddling. These early years, though spent within the family home, subtly indoctrinated them into the Spartan way of life, emphasizing endurance, obedience, and suppressing individual desires for communal strength. Then, at the tender age of 7, the most significant transition occurred. Every Spartan boy was taken from his home and his family, never to live with them again. This was the true beginning of the Agoge, the Spartan system of education and training. He was no longer an individual with a family name, but a member of a collective, a herd, as it was sometimes called. These young boys were grouped into companies and moved into communal barracks, stark, unadorned buildings where they would live, eat, and train together for the next decade or more. The purpose of this abrupt separation was clear: to sever all familial bonds and instill an absolute loyalty to the state and the group. They were placed under the strict supervision of the paidonomos, an official appointed by the state, whose sole responsibility was to oversee the Agoge and ensure the boys adhered to its rigorous discipline. Life in the barracks was harsh and uniform. Boys wore simple, rough clothing, often a single cloak regardless of the weather, and were given meager rations, deliberately insufficient to teach them resourcefulness and the ability to steal without being caught, a skill considered vital for future military campaigns. Their hair was cut short, their heads shaven, and their feet often left bare to harden them against rough terrain. They slept on hard beds made of reeds collected from the Eurotas River, the main river flowing through the Spartan plain, stripped by hand without the use of knives. Every aspect of their existence was designed to strip away comfort and cultivate self-reliance, physical toughness, and an unwavering sense of communal identity. This was not merely education. It was a deliberate, systematic forging of the Spartan warrior, beginning with the complete dismantling of the individual and rebuilding him as an unbreakable component of the collective. At age 7, the Spartan boy's world shifted dramatically. He left his family home not to return until full adulthood, entering the Agoge, the state-run training system. This was not merely education, it was a total transformation. You would be grouped with boys your age, known as a lokos, living communally in barracks under the strict supervision of older youths and state-appointed instructors, the paidonomos. From this moment, your life belonged to Sparta. The training was brutal, designed to strip away softness and foster an iron will. You were given only one cloak to wear, regardless of the season, and no shoes, forcing your feet to harden against the rough terrain. This constant exposure to the elements, the biting cold of winter and the scorching heat of summer, was deliberate. It built endurance, teaching you to disregard discomfort, to find strength in hardship, and to endure what others could not. Food was deliberately scarce, just enough to survive, but never enough to feel full. This was not a punishment, but a lesson. You were encouraged to supplement your meager rations by stealing, not out of greed, but out of necessity. If you were caught, however, the punishment was severe, not for the act of stealing, but for your clumsiness, for being detected. This practice honed stealth, cunning, and resourcefulness, all vital skills for any warrior who might one day operate behind enemy lines. It taught you self-reliance and the importance of outwitting your adversaries, even if they were your own trainers. Physical exercises dominated your days. You would run for miles across the rugged Laconian landscape, wrestle constantly, and engage in various forms of combat training using rudimentary weapons. Your body became a tool, honed and hardened. Pain was not an excuse. It was a constant companion, a test of your resolve. You learned to ignore it, to push past it, to function even when your limbs screamed in protest, when blisters formed on your feet from endless running, or when the cold stone walls of the barracks offered no warmth during the depths of winter. Every ache, every bruise, every shiver served as a reminder that your body was merely a vessel to be commanded, not a master to be obeyed. Scars were not just marks, they were indelible proofs of your endurance and willingness to suffer for the state, silent tales of battles won against your own physical limits. Beyond the physical, the Agoge meticulously shaped your mind and character. Obedience was paramount. You were taught to follow orders without question, to respect your elders and superiors implicitly. Disobeying an instructor, or even an older boy, could result in immediate, severe corporal punishment. This instilled a deep-seated discipline, a reflex of submission to authority, that would make the Spartan phalanx an unstoppable force on the battlefield. Speech was curtailed. You were taught to speak concisely, to express yourself with maximum impact in the fewest possible words, a style famously known as Laconian brevity. Eloquence was suspicion. Directness was valued. This fostered a pragmatic, no-nonsense approach to communication, reflecting the Spartan focus on action over rhetoric. You learned to listen more than you spoke, to observe, and to act decisively. Music and dance were also part of your curriculum, but not for artistic expression in the conventional sense. They were integrated into military drills, teaching rhythm, coordination, and the ability to move as a unified body. Choral singing instilled camaraderie and allowed for the memorization of Spartan laws, heroic deeds, and martial songs that celebrated courage and sacrifice. These activities reinforced the collective identity, ensuring that individual aspirations were subsumed by the needs of the group. Fear was something to be conquered, not indulged. You were systematically exposed to situations designed to challenge your courage, to force you to face dangers without flinching, to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. Courage was not merely a virtue, It was the very foundation of the Spartan identity, the bedrock upon which the entire society rested. Any sign of cowardice or weakness, any hesitation in the face of adversity was met with immediate scorn and social ostracism, a shame far worse than any physical pain. You learned to suppress all outward displays of emotion, to present a stoic, unyielding front to the world, for vulnerability was considered a dangerous crack in the collective strength of the community, a potential weakness that could be exploited by enemies. The older boys in the Agoge often served as mentors and disciplinarians for the younger ones, creating a hierarchical system that reinforced obedience and responsibility. This structure taught leadership from an early age, preparing you to command and to be commanded. The bonds formed in these barracks, forged through shared hardship and unwavering discipline, were often stronger than family ties. Your fellow trainees, your syssitia, common mess hall members, became your true family. The individuals you would fight alongside and, if necessary, die for. This rigorous training was not just about making you a soldier, it was about making you a Spartan. It stripped away individuality, replacing it with an absolute devotion to the state. Your identity became inextricably linked to the military, to the collective, to the very concept of Sparta itself. You were taught to view death in battle not as a tragedy, but as the ultimate honor, the highest expression of your loyalty and courage. Your entire being was molded into an instrument of state power, ready to defend Sparta against any internal or external threat, particularly the ever-present danger posed by the vast population of helots. The relentless discipline, the constant physical and mental pressure ensured that by the time you reached adulthood, you were not just a warrior, but a living embodiment of Sparta's iron will, ready to serve, ready to die, without question, without hesitation. Your life, your very breath, was a testament to the Agoge. The Agoge, as you now understand, was a relentless crucible, shaping boys from the tender age of 7, but the true test, the final metamorphosis into a full Spartan warrior, awaited them as they approached adulthood. Around the age of 18 to 20, the most promising and resilient of these young men faced the ultimate trial, a clandestine and brutal rite of passage known as the Krypteia, a term meaning the secret thing. This was not a formal military exercise with cheering crowds or public accolades. Quite the opposite. The Krypteia was a covert operation, a final chilling lesson in cunning, ruthlessness, and survival. Selected young Spartans, often those who had displayed exceptional potential for leadership and combat, were dispatched into the wilderness, often with nothing more than a dagger and minimal provisions. Their mission was stark and unforgiving: to live off the land, to survive undetected, and to eliminate any helots they encountered. The helots, as you will recall, were the subjugated population of Laconia and Messenia, bound to the land and far outnumbering their Spartan masters. Their constant presence, their simmering resentment, was a perpetual undercurrent of fear and vigilance in Spartan society. The Krypteia served multiple purposes. It was a brutal final examination, forcing the young Spartan to embrace extreme independence, resourcefulness, and the chilling ability to kill silently and without hesitation. It also functioned as a form of state-sanctioned terrorism, a stark reminder to the helots of the ever-present Spartan dominion, ensuring their obedience through fear. Imagine the cold, dark nights, the rustling leaves, the heightened senses, as a young Spartan moved through the deep shadows, constantly alert, constantly hunting, constantly hunted by the grim reality of his mission. This experience stripped away any lingering softness, any remaining shred of individual sentimentality, replacing it with an unyielding, almost predatory focus on the state's security. Upon successfully completing the Krypteia, or simply reaching the age of 20 and having endured the full rigors of the Agoge, a young Spartan finally achieved the coveted status of a homoios, meaning equal. This was the pinnacle of Spartan citizenship. As a homoios, you were granted full political rights, including the ability to vote in the Apella, the Spartan assembly, and to hold public office. More importantly, you were now a full-fledged soldier, a hoplite ready to take your place in the formidable Spartan phalanx. However, this new status did not mean a return to private life or familial comforts. Far from it. Your existence remained entirely communal, your personal identity subsumed by the collective. The central pillar of this communal existence was the syssitia, or common messes. These were mandatory dining groups, typically consisting of 15 to 20 men, to which every homoios belonged. Each member was required to contribute a fixed amount of food, wine, and cheese monthly, ensuring that all shared equally in the simple, austere meals. Life in the syssitia was not merely about eating. It was a continuation of the Agoge's lessons in discipline, camaraderie, and equality. Here, older, experienced warriors mentored the younger men, sharing stories of campaigns and reinforcing the Spartan ethos. Discussions often revolved around military strategy, civic duty, and the glory of Sparta. There was no room for ostentation or personal indulgence. All ate the same fare, sat on the same benches, and lived by the same strict rules. This communal dining cemented the bonds between soldiers, transforming them from individuals into an unbreakable unit, a brotherhood forged in shared hardship and unwavering loyalty to one another and to the state. From the moment you became a homoios at 20, your life became a continuous cycle of military service. You lived in the barracks, trained daily, and were always ready for deployment. Marriage was permitted, but you were expected to continue living with your messmates until the age of 30 or even beyond, depending on military needs. Even after establishing a household, your primary allegiance remained to your syssitia and to the state. You were a soldier first, a husband and father second, if at all. This lifelong commitment to military readiness, from the age of 20 until 60, when you were finally released from active duty, meant that Sparta always maintained a standing army of highly trained, battle-hardened veterans. It was a society designed from the ground up to produce warriors, where every aspect of life, from birth to old age, was meticulously crafted to serve the singular purpose of military might. The individual was not important. Only the state and its formidable phalanx mattered. This iron discipline, forged through decades of relentless training and communal living, was what made the Spartan army a force unlike any other in the ancient world, a machine of war perfected by design. Once a Spartan youth, forged by the Agoge, reached the age of 20 and became a homoios, his life fully merged with the state's military purpose. The culmination of this relentless training was not merely individual prowess, but the creation of the most formidable fighting unit in the ancient world, the Spartan phalanx. Imagine a wall of bronze, wood, and muscle moving with a singular, terrifying purpose. This was the hoplite phalanx, the very heart of Spartan military might. Each soldier, known as a hoplite, carried a heavy, circular wooden shield, famously called a hoplon, which was often faced with bronze, designed to cover him from chin to knee. He held it firmly with his left arm, protecting his own left side and, crucially, the right side of the man standing immediately next to him. In his right hand, he wielded a long thrusting spear, the dore, a primary weapon typically measuring between 7 and 9 feet in length, a formidable instrument for close quarters combat. A shorter, double-edged sword, known as the xiphos, served as a secondary weapon, reserved for when the battle devolved into a desperate, chaotic brawl, or when the spear was lost or broken. The true profound power of the Spartan phalanx lay not in the individual strength or skill of its components, but in their absolute, unwavering unity. The decades of the Agoge had systematically stripped away any lingering sense of individual ego or personal ambition, rigorously replacing it with an unwavering, almost religious commitment to the collective, to the state, and to the well-being of their brothers in arms. They trained ceaselessly day after day, year after year, marching in perfect, synchronized step, their heavy shields interlocking seamlessly. This created an impenetrable living barrier, a moving fortress of human will and bronze. The rhythmic, almost hypnotic beat of their advance, often accompanied by the haunting, almost trance-like but incredibly precise music of flutes, was not merely for ceremonial effect. It was meticulously designed to keep them in flawless formation, ensuring every man moved as one, but also to instill a deep, primal fear in the hearts of their enemies. There was no room, no tolerance for individual heroics that might break the line, no impulsive breaking of ranks to chase a fleeing foe, no moment of hesitation. Their strength was derived entirely from their cohesion, their unyielding ability to push forward as a single, irresistible, and utterly disciplined force. When the Spartan phalanx advanced, it was not simply a group of men engaging in battle. It was a living, breathing, efficient machine of war, a truly terrifying embodiment of their society's singular focus. The sight of their distinctive crimson cloaks, which famously concealed any blood from their wounds, the blinding glint of sunlight reflecting off their polished bronze helmets, and the dense, seemingly endless forest of gleaming spears extending relentlessly forward, was frequently enough to make many adversaries falter, break formation, or even flee in terror before the actual clash of arms even occurred. The ground would often vibrate beneath their heavy, synchronized boots, the air filled with the low, guttural, collective chants and war cries, and then the eventual thunderous, bone-jarring impact of shield against shield, spear against armor. This created an atmosphere of pure, unyielding, almost palpable terror for those who dared to stand against them. This was not a chaotic melee, an unorganized brawl. It was a meticulously disciplined, brutally methodical process of destruction. Every single maneuver, every precise step forward, every calculated thrust of the spear was executed with an almost unimaginable precision, born from a lifetime of ingrained habit and ceaseless repetition. Their objective in battle was remarkably simple, yet devastatingly effective: to utterly shatter the enemy line, to push them back relentlessly, to create disarray and panic, and then to ruthlessly exploit that chaos. They fought not for personal glory, though the collective glory would be immense, but for the very survival, the very existence of Sparta itself. Retreat from battle was never an option. Under any circumstances, surrender was utterly unthinkable, a concept entirely alien to their warrior ethos. To drop one's shield in battle, even in the face of overwhelming odds, was considered the ultimate disgrace, an unforgivable crime against the state, and a profound betrayal of one's brothers in arms, who relied on that shield for their own protection. This ingrained ethos of never yielding, of standing firm no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter the sacrifice, made the Spartan phalanx virtually unbreakable in any open-pitched battle. While other Greek city-states also widely employed the phalanx formation, a common military tactic of the era, none, absolutely none, could ever truly match the Spartan commitment to its relentless perfection. Their entire unique society was meticulously geared towards the singular purpose of producing these elite, unparalleled warriors. This process began from the very moment of a child's birth, continued unbroken through the brutal, all-encompassing rigor of the Agoge, and culminated in their lifelong, unwavering dedication to military service. The hoplites of Sparta were not merely part-time soldiers called up for a campaign. They were professional, full-time warriors honed to an almost inhuman degree by decades of continuous, brutal training, bound together by an unbreakable code of honor, duty, and iron discipline. This unwavering, total dedication to their military craft allowed Sparta to project an immense, almost terrifying power across the entire Hellenic world, establishing its undeniable dominance through the sheer terror and devastating effectiveness of its supremely disciplined war machine. The very name, Spartan, became synonymous with courage, discipline, and an unyielding will to fight, a reputation earned through countless battles where their phalanx proved its legendary might. This formidable military machine, however, rested upon a foundation of profound tension, a silent and ever-present threat within Sparta itself. For the Spartans, the warrior elite, were a minority. Their entire society, their unique way of life, was made possible by the labor of a vast, subjugated population known as the Helots. These were not slaves in the typical sense, but rather state-owned serfs, descendants of various conquered peoples, primarily Messenians and Laconians, defeated and absorbed by Sparta centuries earlier. They lived on the land, cultivating it, and were compelled to provide a fixed amount of their produce to their Spartan masters, sustaining the very system that oppressed them. They possessed a semblance of family life, even some personal property, but were bound to the land, forbidden from leaving it, and could only be bought and sold with the land. Their existence was one of constant toil, a life without freedom, always under the watchful, wary eye of their overlords. The Spartans lived in perpetual fear of a Helot uprising. The numerical disparity was terrifying. For every Spartan citizen, there were 7 to 10 Helots. This imbalance meant that any lapse in vigilance, any sign of weakness, could ignite a rebellion that would sweep away the Spartan way of life entirely. This constant existential threat profoundly shaped every aspect of Spartan policy, both domestic and foreign. Their rigorous Agoge, their communal meals, their unwavering military focus, all were designed not just to create formidable warriors, but to maintain absolute control over the Helot population. The fear of internal revolt was as potent a force in their society as any external enemy. To manage this threat, the Spartans employed a combination of systematic oppression and psychological warfare. They were known to periodically declare war on the Helots, a chilling ritual that formally sanctioned their killing without the stain of murder, ensuring that any Helot who seemed too strong, too rebellious, or too intelligent could be eliminated. This was often carried out by the Krypteia, the secret police, comprised of young Spartan men in the final stages of their Agoge. These youths would roam the countryside, especially at night, seeking out and executing any Helots deemed a threat. This brutal practice served multiple purposes: instilling terror among Helots, weeding out potential leaders, and providing young Spartans with practical experience in stealth, survival, and cold-blooded application of force. The Krypteia was a stark embodiment of the Spartans' ruthless determination to maintain their dominance, a dark mirror to their celebrated discipline. Beyond the overt violence, there was a pervasive atmosphere of control. Helots were forbidden from possessing weapons, though necessity often led them to improvise. They were forced to wear distinctive clothing, often animal skins, to mark their inferior status and prevent them from blending in with the free population. Public humiliation was also a tool of control. Helots were sometimes forced to get drunk and perform humiliating dances or songs, serving as a cautionary example to Spartan youths about the dangers of intemperance. These acts were designed to strip them of dignity, to break their spirit, and to reinforce the absolute hierarchy of Spartan society. The constant need to suppress the Helots also severely limited Sparta's foreign policy options. Unlike other Greek city-states, Sparta could not afford to send large armies far from home for extended periods. The risk of leaving their homeland undefended, even for a short time, was too great. Major military campaigns often had to be carefully timed and executed with a constant eye on the stability of the Helot population. This internal vulnerability meant that Sparta, despite its formidable army, was often hesitant to engage in distant conflicts or to establish a vast overseas empire. Their primary military objective remained the maintenance of order within their own borders, ensuring the continued subjugation of the Helots. This unique internal dynamic created a society unlike any other in the ancient world. While other Greek states debated philosophy, built grand temples, and developed vibrant trade networks, Sparta remained singularly focused on military readiness and internal security. Every Spartan male was a soldier, every aspect of their life geared towards maintaining the stability of a system built on the forced labor of an unwilling populace. Their discipline, their austerity, their unwavering commitment to the state all stemmed from this fundamental necessity to keep the Helots in check, to prevent the inevitable explosion of resentment from consuming their world. It was a life lived on a knife edge, a constant vigilance that defined their very existence and hardened them beyond measure. Their strength was born of fear, their unity a shield against a constant, unseen enemy within their own land. The pervasive anxiety surrounding the Helots a constant undercurrent in Spartan life, profoundly influenced the male citizens and also shaped the very fabric of women's roles within this unique society. Unlike any other Greek city-state, Sparta understood that its survival depended on the strength and vitality of all its citizens, including its female population, not just its warriors. This imperative led to a remarkably distinct position for Spartan women, granting them freedoms and responsibilities that often astonished and even scandalized their counterparts across the Aegean. Their lives diverged sharply from the secluded existence typically prescribed for women in other Greek polis, where women were largely confined to the inner quarters of their homes, their public presence minimal, and their voices unheard outside domestic matters. From an early age, Spartan girls were not secluded within the home, as was common elsewhere in Greece. Instead, they participated in a rigorous system of physical training, a parallel, though less brutal version of the boys' Agoge. You would have seen them running, wrestling, throwing the discus and javelin in public gymnasiums, clad in short tunics that allowed for freedom of movement, a sight considered shockingly immodest by Athenians, who believed respectable women should remain veiled and unseen. This athletic regimen prepared their bodies for childbirth and for resilience, fostering a physical toughness that mirrored the martial spirit of their male relatives. This training was a civic duty, a direct contribution to the military might of the state, extending beyond mere aesthetic beauty or personal leisure. A healthy mother, they believed, ensured a healthy son, ensuring Sparta's future and its continued dominance over its subjugated populations. Beyond their physical development, Spartan women also enjoyed unparalleled economic autonomy. While men were perpetually engaged in military training and service, forbidden from engaging in trade or agriculture, women were empowered to manage the family estates. This meant they could own land, inherit property, and even conduct business transactions independently. Over generations, this led to a significant accumulation of wealth in the hands of Spartan women, who by some estimates came to own a substantial portion, perhaps even 2/5 of all Spartan land. This economic power translated into considerable influence within the household and community. They were the practical administrators of the state's domestic economy, ensuring that the warrior class was fed and sustained, freeing men entirely for their martial duties, and allowing them to dedicate their entire lives to military excellence without distraction. Their financial independence was a cornerstone of Sparta's unique social structure, directly supporting its military infrastructure. Their role as mothers was revered, but it was a reverence tied directly to the state's needs. A Spartan mother's greatest pride focused on her son's bravery and unwavering dedication to Sparta, valuing these qualities above gentleness or artistic talent. The famous saying, "Come back with your shield or on it," attributed to Spartan mothers, perfectly encapsulates this ethos. It was a stern exhortation to victory or honorable death, a rejection of surrender or cowardice, reflecting the absolute priority of state over individual life. Their influence was moral and cultural, reinforcing the values of discipline, courage, and self-sacrifice that were the bedrock of Spartan identity. They were the primary educators in the home, for young children, instilling these values before the boys entered the Agoge, and the girls continued their physical and civic preparation. While they did not participate in the assembly or hold formal political office, their economic power and their crucial role in perpetuating the warrior class gave them an undeniable, if indirect, authority and respect. They were integral partners indeed in the functioning of the Spartan machine, significant figures who surpassed the traditional roles of wives or daughters. They were custodians of the home front who maintained the stability necessary for the men to focus solely on war. This unique arrangement, born out of the constant need for military readiness and internal control, created a society where women were simultaneously celebrated for their strength and bound by the rigid demands of the state, a testament to Sparta's singular approach to survival and power. Their distinct status was a practical necessity, a logical extension of Lycurgus's vision for a society entirely geared towards military strength and communal cohesion, allowing Sparta to maintain its unique and formidable posture in the ancient world. Sparta's unique way of life, built on unwavering discipline and a constant readiness for war, forged a society unlike any other in the ancient world. This internal strength, though demanding, positioned them as a formidable power, inevitably leading to conflict with other major Greek city-states. For decades, a simmering rivalry had grown between Sparta and Athens, the two titans of the Hellenic world. These were two vastly different societies, each embodying distinct ideals of Greek civilization. Sparta, the land power, rigid in its oligarchy and agrarian focus, commanded the Peloponnesian League, a network of allied states bound by military allegiance and a shared fear of Athenian expansion. Athens, meanwhile, thrived as a vibrant naval empire, a bustling democracy driven by commerce and innovation, leading the Delian League, an alliance initially formed against Persia, but now effectively an Athenian dominion. This league, rich from tribute and extensive maritime trade, represented a stark contrast to Sparta's austere simplicity. Their ideologies clashed profoundly. Sparta's disciplined communal life against Athens' individualistic pursuit of knowledge and wealth, their land-based might against Athenian sea power. The very foundations of their societies seemed destined to collide. The inevitable clash finally erupted into what historians would call the Peloponnesian War, a protracted struggle that would engulf nearly 3 decades and reshape the map of Greece. The conflict ignited over a series of escalating disputes, each like a spark landing on dry kindling. A critical point was Athens' economic sanctions against Megara, a Spartan ally, which choked their trade and livelihood. Further tensions arose from conflicts involving Corinth, another powerful Spartan ally, and its colony, Corcyra, where Athenian intervention was seen as a direct challenge to Corinthian influence. These skirmishes and decrees, seemingly minor in isolation, drew both major powers into direct confrontation as alliances compelled each side to support its partners. The air across Greece grew thick with anticipation, heavy with the coming storm. Sparta's initial strategy was direct and brutal, yearly invasions of the Athenian heartland, Attica. Spartan hoplites, the finest infantry in Greece, renowned for their disciplined ranks and unbreakable spirit, would march across the dusty plains, their bronze shields gleaming under the sun. They would systematically burn crops, fell olive trees, and devastate the countryside, aiming to force Athens into a pitched battle on land where Spartan supremacy was unquestioned. But Athens, under the strategic guidance of its brilliant leader Pericles, refused to engage. Instead, its citizens retreated behind the formidable long walls, massive fortifications connecting the city to its port, Piraeus. From within these cold stone barriers, they could rely on their powerful navy to import supplies from their vast empire and raid Spartan coastal territories, turning the land war into a stalemate. This created a war of attrition where neither side could deliver a decisive blow, a grinding conflict of patience and endurance. However, Athens soon faced an unforeseen and devastating enemy. A terrible plague swept through the overcrowded city, confined behind its walls. The disease, believed to have originated in Africa, ravaged the population, claiming a quarter of its inhabitants, including Pericles himself, whose strategic genius had guided Athens through the early years of the war. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, and despair settled upon the city, weakening it from within. Despite this monumental setback, the Spartans also faced their own humiliations. A notable incident at Pylos and Sphacteria saw a contingent of elite Spartan hoplites captured by Athenian forces. This was an unheard-of event, a profound psychological blow to a society that prided itself on never surrendering. The capture of these warriors, whose names were synonymous with invincibility, further prolonged the conflict as Sparta desperately sought their return. A period of uneasy truce, known as the Peace of Nicias, briefly halted the fighting, offering a respite from the constant bloodshed. This peace was largely driven by mutual exhaustion and Sparta's desire to recover its captured hoplites. However, the underlying tensions and strategic rivalries remained unresolved, simmering beneath the surface. It was Athens' audacious yet ultimately disastrous expedition to Sicily that reignited the war with full fury. In a grand display of overconfidence and ambition, a massive Athenian fleet and army sailed to conquer Syracuse, a major Sicilian city and ally of Sparta. The expedition was a monumental failure, a catastrophic defeat that saw nearly all their ships destroyed and tens of thousands of their men captured or killed in the harsh Sicilian landscape. The news of this monumental loss, carried by the winds across the Aegean Sea, crippled Athenian naval power and morale, providing Sparta with a crucial opening to press its advantage. With newfound resolve and, crucially, significant financial aid from the Persian Empire, an unlikely ally for Sparta, but one motivated by a desire to weaken all Greek states, Sparta shifted its strategy. Under the brilliant and cunning leadership of Lysander, a resourceful Spartan admiral, they began to seriously challenge Athenian naval supremacy, a domain previously thought impregnable. A critical strategic move was the establishment of a permanent Spartan garrison at Thessalia, a fortified position located deep within Athenian territory, just miles from the city itself. From this unyielding base, Spartan forces could continually harass Athens, cut off its vital overland supply routes from the rich farmlands of Attica, and encourage more helots to flee, swelling their own ranks and draining Athenian resources. This constant pressure placed immense strain on the Athenian economy and its internal stability, turning the war into a desperate struggle for survival. Athens, once so proud and powerful, found itself beleaguered, marked by internal political turmoil, dwindling resources, and a growing sense of despair. The climax of this long and bloody war came at the Battle of Agoge, a decisive naval engagement in the Hellespont, the narrow strait vital for Athenian grain imports. Lysander, through cunning strategy and superior discipline, caught the Athenian fleet unprepared, utterly destroying almost all of their remaining ships in a swift and brutal encounter. The salty air carried the cries of defeat across the waters, mingling with the splintering wood of the Athenian vessels. Without a navy to import food and supplies, Athens, starved and exhausted, was finally forced to surrender. The terms dictated by Sparta were harsh and humiliating. The formidable long walls, symbols of Athenian defiance and protection, were systematically torn down, stone by laborious stone, to the sound of Spartan flutes. Athens' once mighty fleet was reduced to a mere handful of ships, and its cherished democracy was dismantled, replaced by an oppressive oligarchy. The 30 tyrants imposed by Sparta's will. Thus, after nearly 3 decades of relentless warfare, marked by shifting fortunes, devastating plagues, and strategic brilliance, Sparta emerged as the undisputed hegemon of Greece. Its iron discipline, the unwavering resolve of its hoplites, and its surprising ability to adapt strategically, particularly in naval warfare under Lysander's innovative command, had proven decisive. For a brief period, the world of ancient Greece bowed to the will of the warrior state, a testament to the power of its singular, relentless focus on military might and social cohesion. Sparta's victory was not merely a military triumph, it was a profound ideological statement, seemingly proving that austerity and strict discipline could ultimately prevail over democratic freedoms and imperial ambition. However, this hard-won hegemony would prove to be a fleeting and ultimately complex burden for the Spartans themselves. The zenith of Spartan power, achieved through relentless discipline and military might, paradoxically contained the subtle seeds of its eventual decline. The very rigidity of their system, so effective for maintaining internal control and winning wars, proved ill-suited for the complexities of empire. Sparta was a state built on simplicity and austerity, designed for a small elite warrior class dominating a vast, subjugated population. It lacked the administrative flexibility, economic diversity, and diplomatic nuance required to govern a wider network of states. A critical challenge emerged from within. The dwindling number of full Spartan citizens, the homoioi, or equals. To remain a homoios, a man had to maintain his land allotment and contribute to the communal mess halls, the syssitia. Constant warfare, though glorious, brought attrition. Strict social laws and a reluctance to integrate outsiders meant that losses in battle were not easily replaced. Economic disparities, even within their austere system, meant that some homoioi could no longer meet the syssitia contribution, effectively losing their full citizenship. This shrinking pool of elite warriors meant that the core of their military, the unbreakable phalanx, became smaller and less resilient over time. The strength of Sparta had always rested on the unity and discipline of its citizen army, and as that army diminished in numbers, so did the state's power. Furthermore, the Lycurgan system, which deliberately eschewed wealth and trade to prevent corruption and foster martial values, now hindered Sparta's ability to adapt. While it kept their warriors focused, it prevented the accumulation of resources necessary for long-term power projection. Foreign gold and silver, once strictly forbidden, began to seep into Spartan society after their victories, subtly eroding the austere principles that had defined them. The pursuit of personal gain, once alien, began to challenge the communal ethos. The myth of Spartan invincibility, though challenged at Thermopylae, remained largely intact for generations. However, this myth would be shattered definitively at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC. Here, a brilliant Theban general named Epaminondas, employing innovative tactics that concentrated his forces on a single flank, decisively defeated the Spartan army. This was not merely a loss, it was a revelation. The world saw that the Spartan phalanx, once thought impregnable, could be broken. The defeat was devastating, both militarily and psychologically. The Thebans followed this victory by invading Laconia, Spartan territory itself, an act unimaginable for centuries. More profoundly, Epaminondas marched into Messenia, the fertile land that had been the primary source of Helot labor, and liberated its people. This act severed the economic lifeline of Sparta, freeing the very population whose subjugation had formed the bedrock of the Spartan system. Without the Helots to work the land, the homoioi could no longer sustain their communal obligations, accelerating the decline of the citizen class. Sparta never fully recovered from these blows. It remained an independent city-state for centuries, but its glory days were irrevocably past. It became a shadow of its former self. Its military might diminished, its social structure fractured, and its influence waned. Eventually, like other Greek city-states, it was absorbed first into the Hellenistic empires and then into the vast Roman Empire. Yet, despite its eventual decline and absorption, the legacy of Sparta continued to echo through history, far beyond its physical borders. The Spartan ideal of unwavering discipline, of collective strength over individual ambition, of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and of absolute devotion to the state left an indelible mark. Their unique approach to education, the Agoge, became a model for military training and character development, even if few dared to emulate its full severity. The laconic style of speech, brief and impactful, remains a testament to their value of concise communication. The legend of the 300 at Thermopylae, standing against a vast Persian army, became a timeless symbol of self-sacrifice and heroism, inspiring countless generations. Philosophers and military thinkers pondered the Spartan system, admiring its capacity to forge formidable warriors and maintain social order, even as they recognized its limitations. The very word Spartan entered the global lexicon, signifying austerity, rigor, and an unyielding spirit. This was a state that prioritized virtue and duty above all else, where the pursuit of excellence in war was life's ultimate purpose. Their story, though it ended in decline, continues to resonate as a powerful testament to the human capacity for extreme dedication and the complex interplay between societal structure and human nature. It reminds us that strength can arise from the most rigorous of foundations, and that even in an age of complexity, the echoes of iron discipline can still inspire a quiet awe.